Well, hello, and welcome to another episode of the Imperfect Men's Club. My name is Mark Aylward, and I'm here as always with my good friend, colleague, and co-host Jim Gurley. And yeah, we had another great pregame, but it was an interesting one because Jim came to Orlando, where I live, last week for a conference, and we got to sit down with me and Jim and my girlfriend Shayla, and had a lovely conversation and a couple of drinks and some food. And and yeah, and then Jim stayed at the conference, so we didn't record last week. But this recording this week, this episode's going to be, it stemmed from a conversation that Jim had with a couple of other people that were at this conference while they were waiting in a hotel lobby for Ubers to take them to different next locations. And it locked right into the framework. I think, Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the guys that you were talking to, a man and a woman, who weren't together. They were separate, but they were both in the conversation. And the man asked you at one point in time what kind of advice you might give him around the business. And I don't want to speak for you, but it seems like because both of us have been so heavily invested in our framework for so many years, it comes up in almost every conversation we have. And I'll throw it over to you to say, give us the context of that conversation and the question itself, and then maybe begin the story with what your initial response was, because I have a feeling we can wrap it all around the wheel.
Yeah, Mark, it was first of all great meeting with you and Shayla. Always nice to catch up in real life, and really enjoyed that. But yeah, just to kind of set this the scene, and you touched on this in the pregame. Um, I was in a it was a major conference. It was the Design and Construction Week. This year was at Orlando, Florida. Last year and years past, it was at the in Las Vegas. But it's also combined with the uh, kitchen and bath industry show, which I'm very involved in because that's part of the NKBA. So I was asked. The NKBA pays for me to be there. I was also asked to speak on Monday, and then again I was on a panel on Wednesday. So it was a great show. But just to kind of explain that the conference is it's end of the day. Everybody's trying to catch Ubers, so it was almost impossible to get an Uber at the actual convention center. So I walk across the street. I was in a hotel lobby, nice hotel, and we were all in the lobby waiting for our Ubers. So the conversation started about how long is your Uber, how long is your Lyft, and so on and so on. It was, some people said 30 minutes, 40 minutes, whatever it was. So I was sitting at one of those lobby couches or whatever, and the conversation came up. We were friendly conversation, and they asked me what I did. I asked them what they did. They were in finance, something to do with loans for new homes or something of that area. And they were a display, so they work with each other. Um, and then, like always, they asked what I did. I said, well, I'm an industry domain expert, and I'm an inventor, and I also do some speaking. That's why I'm here. I also do a weekly podcast. Oh, what's your podcast about? So, of course, went through the IMC framework, the 5 areas of your life, profession, wellness, relationships, money, and so on. And one was going through a divorce. The gal that was there, she had an 18-year-old son, but was in the middle of a divorce or beginning stages of a divorce. And he was probably about 40 with a couple kids and a wife. So just kind of set the scene.
Mm-hmm.
And so the conversation went on, and he, I explained the framework, and we're just having a friendly conversation. He says, "Hey, can I ask you a question?" I said, "Sure." He goes, "What advice would you have for me about life, business?" And I remember pausing or thinking, first of all, like as you said, I'm honored that I was asked that question. I also realized that whatever I say, he may hold on to for the rest of his life if it's worth it. Um, so my first reaction was kind of shocked, a little, not shocked, but kind of surprised because he said it in a very sincere way. I think
Mm-hmm.
he was referring to business, but as we know, we just talked about the framework. It's not just business. There's these other 5 areas of your life. And of course, as a man, a lot of our self-worth, a lot of our identity is based on our career. And he had a VP role of some kind because he gave me his card. I saw it later. So he was a high level guy in terms of his corporate work. Um, but the first thing I said is just the fact that you asked that question puts you in a whole other realm of people because very few people would ask that question. I find that that's a sign of emotional intelligence, but you know, to be effective in life, to be successful, ask a lot of questions.
Hmm.
So that was my initial reaction was that. The other reaction was, hey, I've been asked this a few times, and maybe in the past I would try to give advice, but I also realize only worse than no advice is bad advice. So I don't give advice. What I'll share with you is perspective. I'll share maybe some life lived experiences, but I don't want to give you advice because I don't know if my experiences in life apply to yours.
Hmm.
And when we speak, you also have to realize that it's important to put things in context as far as the stage of your life. I'm in a very different stage of my life than you are right now.
Hmm.
So I think of life as in increments of tens and fives, right? 0 to 10. We talk about this, our childhood, our heritage, and so on. 20-year-old, that's a very different experience. Uh, and then your 30-year-old self is very different than your 40-year self. Your 40-year-old self has a wife and kids. That's very different than where I'm at. So I think it's important to know that. Um, then the next answer was in very simple terms is math. Understand math. The math applies to everything. The 80-20 rule, the Pareto rule applies to everything. Are you
Hmm.
familiar with it? Of course, he was familiar with it. It says, um, yeah, understand that because whether it's business or anything, the 80-20 always seems to hold true. Um, 80% of your business comes from 20% of your customers. 80% of your problems come from 20% of your customers. So it applies to everything in business and life. Understand it. And the other one that's so simple, but most people um, never figure it out is 90% of life is showing up.
Hmm.
Show up. Show up on time. Show up all the time. Show up prepared. Show up with a good attitude. You just became part of the 10%. But most
Hmm.
people can't show up. And the reason they can't show up is because they failed. And failure is probably the hardest thing. Failing is part of growing, but it's not what happens to you. It's how you respond to what happens to you. And so I went deep on that in terms of
Hmm.
you know, it's okay to fail. It's hard, but at the end of the day, it's not what happens to you. It's respond what happens to you. And you've heard me say this many times before. So we grow bitter or we grow better. It's a
Hmm.
decision. The reason I was speaking to both of them. She's going through a divorce, so she's in a very different stage than I was. And yeah, and this went on for the 20-30 minutes because all three of us are looking at our phones waiting for the Ubers to show up on the countdown. So it was a very, again, we don't know each other. We just met each other. It's a friendly conversation. No drinking. Where it wasn't we weren't at a bar. We were in the lobby, right? So it wasn't.
Hmm.
But but to have that timer on your hand and knowing that I may never see these people again the rest of my life, but what I say could have a huge impact on how they view the world.
You know,
So,
there's so much there, Jim, and I appreciate you bringing the story to the pregame, and it's fascinating to me on a number of different levels. I think I'll be a little redundant here, but I would rather be that than remiss. And maybe emphasis is helpful. I think the first thing that I thought of when you told me is what a flattering question. You must have been honored to be asked that question. It certainly in a short period of time, you made quite an impression. And I think the other thing that strikes me humbly is I've been asked that question myself over the years, probably mostly because of what I do for a living or what I did for a living. Just I was in the advice business, the career advice business, but I appreciate your distinction as well that I really am not going to give you advice. And when we talk about offering services to our listener base in the near future, I don't think it will be advice. I think it will be opinion, it will be observation, it will be context, it will be questions, and there'll be a lot of listening. And I think that, to your point, people that ask a lot of questions are, I find, to be more intelligent, more humble, more kind than people that just want to give a lot of answers. And I've been coached by quite a few people in my life. And one of the things that consistently comes up is people are less interested in your opinion on things and they're more interested in your observations about things, like
Hmm.
not where you got to, but how you got there, right? They're more
Hmm.
interested in your observations about things than they are. And I don't think people respond well to advice, particularly unsolicited advice. But the other thing that was interesting to me was how different your audiences were. And I literally have been almost both of those people. I've been a 40-year-old
Hmm.
guy with three young children doing well in business, and life's
Hmm.
just flying by. You're not even paying attention
Yeah.
because there's so much going
Interesting.
on. And you've
Yeah.
got the physical energy, you're younger.
Hmm.
There's so many different things going on. And I've also been that person who's in the middle of a divorce. I
Hmm.
wasn't the woman in that situation, but I was in the middle of a divorce. And that person is, they're paying attention to a whole different set of things. Their
Hmm.
view on the world is less optimistic.
Hmm.
They're probably a little scared. They're probably a little
Yeah.
confused. They might be feeling a little shame. So it's really interesting that you were very keenly aware of those two different people. And the guy asked you the question. The woman didn't ask you the question, but she was clearly interested in your answer, right?
Oh, no, Mark, you picked up on a couple things that I may have overlooked. They're so important. One, I did what you did subconsciously, actually consciously, and I think about it. But first thing I did is put in myself empathy, right? Remembering the stage he was in his life with young kids and a wife, and then traveling. I became him for a moment. But you're
Mm-hmm.
right. I also remember I'm speaking to the two of them, and I look at her, and she is both their eyes are about the size of silver dollars, right? They're hanging on to every word I say.
Yeah.
So now I'm thinking of her too, because she had an 18-year-old son, and she's very in a very different place than them. So yeah, the observation of it wasn't just answering his question. I was also speaking to two different people and trying to to be understanding of what she was going through at the same time what he was going through. But the conversation this was initiated through a business context, but
Mm-hmm.
but because of the framework that when I explained to them the IMC framework and what we talk about and why we recreated it. So it's kind of back to what you're saying, giving somebody advice, and this comes from what I learned from you and all the years that you've worked with people with their careers. And you often would say, hey, it's not just about their careers. It's get really understanding where they're at in life and finding them the right company, but really understanding, what works for them at that time in their life and their value. Because I say he was a VP. I think his card said VP or something, or sales manager, whatever it was. It's a middle manager position. It's a hard job. It's the
Mm-hmm.
job. You're stuck in the middle, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're making money, but not great money. It's not enough money, and I think. But so let's break down some of these questions. So I appreciate the perspective on that. So the first one was like the question itself, as you said, that it's a sign of high emotional intelligence. But I also went in on that, like the 80/20, get somebody to speak 80% of the time by asking them questions because it's human nature. And we often forget about that. I remember telling my kids this as well when they were starting to go into the workforce. But it's the psychology, but it's just also people will like you more if they talk more and you ask questions about themselves. So I went straight to the psychology of the 80/20 rule of
Well,
asking questions and getting people to talk. Yeah.
I think there's also a very important kind of sub point, if you will, to that. And you brought it up. And I
Yeah.
think it makes you who you are. I think it makes us who we are, and it makes us effective, I think. And that is, you immediately recognized the importance of what might come out of your mouth and the
Mhm.
impact that it might have on someone else's life. And when I talk about leadership, and I try to talk about it a lot because it's a fascinating topic and much
Mhm.
misunderstood topic, I think that I've said this recently, a great leader to me is someone who's willing to take on the responsibility of someone else's well-being.
Mhm.
And I think that if you take on that responsibility, which most people cannot or will not, because it's a big responsibility, the well-being of another human,
Mhm.
is your first instinct was, this is whatever I say is going to be important to this guy. And I'm going to take
Mhm.
that responsibly and seriously. And I got to tell you, Jim, in my experience, most people just blurt stuff out. They don't give that
Mhm.
kind of
Yeah.
intelligent forethought to the importance of an answer, because what you're doing is taking responsibility for this guy's well-being because he asked a favor of you. And I think
Yeah.
that that's a very important part of this whole discussion.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah, he was a stranger, but the word I came up with, I thought about that recently. It's the impact that you can have on others. And those moments don't always come around. You could tell when somebody wants information and you know you're going to have a major impact. To your point earlier, Mark, not everybody wants advice. In fact, most people don't want advice. They
Mm-hmm.
want to give advice. That's why I'm very conscious of not giving advice. And I tell them that, hey, I don't give advice anymore. I've lived, I have life lived experiences. I'm, 20 years older than you. And um, I like to think of it as wisdom. I think you do get some wisdom if those mistakes that you made and those failures you turned into something positive and negative. Because and then I really went all in on that. It's not what happens to you, it's how you respond to what happens to you. And
Yeah. Yeah. No, it makes me think of a conversation I had years ago in Starbucks. I used to spend more time in Starbucks. I haven't been there in years, but this would happen a lot. I would have somebody come and sit down next to me with a cup of coffee, and I'd be on my computer, and I'm a pretty affable guy most of the time. I'm interested in other people if they're not obnoxious and they're interesting as well. And this guy sat down next to me, and we'd never met. I never even seen him before. And we just started talking. And I don't even remember all the things that we talked about, but one thing led to another and another. And he, like this guy that you're talking about, he wanted to engage me. He wanted my opinion. And I tried to give him observations. I tried to give him some phrases that you and I have exchanged on this podcast many times, and you've just used a bunch of them. But I remember him saying something to me at the end when I got to get up and go, Mark. I really don't want to go. I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I want to leave you with this thought. You got to talk to more. The world needs to hear more of Mark. You have to get out there and
that's cool.
share this with more people. And I thought to myself, I can't think of anything more kind for somebody to say to me in this moment than that. And I think you got some of that too, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, let's face it, if it wasn't for doing a weekly podcast about this stuff, I probably wouldn't have been as compelling or as interesting. But since it's what we talk about and you have this framework, I do think there was some credibility because it was a casual conversation. And then when they asked me about, oh, what do you do a podcast on? I said, well, we created this framework and here's these 5 areas. There was no question that made them interested in hearing more. And you also, again, this is back to the value of being in the presence of another person. We forget that that doesn't happen as often as it used to. The
Yeah.
world that we grew up in. So I'm looking at somebody in their eyes, and it's also it's not just a screen, right? It's not just a conversation.
Mhm.
So it's it's a different experience. It's a very different experience.
Well, I think that you
That
obviously, the way that you're talking about it as well, you obviously had a very high level of appreciation for that opportunity. And I think that's wise. I think that, you and I talk about the human connection component of what the world's going to be like. And when you talk about social media and now artificial intelligence and just the division in general,
Mhm.
we're getting farther and farther away from that human connection. So I find, not to put words in your mouth, when I get the opportunity for genuine human connection now, I'm just more appreciative of it because I get
Yeah.
so much less of it.
Yeah, it's a lot of these are coming back to me now because again, I'm remember looking into his eyes, and there was a number of things that he was asking. He also had this, again, impressive guy, just the fact that he asked the question. And then he was very interested in the answer. You could tell by his eyes. He also had this bit of fear in him.
Hmm.
Fear, which you should have fear if you have two kids and a wife, right? And you're in business, right? Fear is good, not fear like scared, fear as in I got to figure this out, right? He's
Yeah.
looking to be better, and he knows he has to figure this out. So I don't want to not mention that. I think you have to have the desire to want to be better, and he asked the question for a reason because he was fearful that maybe the direction he was going at the moment wasn't enough, and he wanted to go to the next place
Yeah. Yeah.
in
It
his
could have just
career or
been.
whatever else. This is a very business environment, right?
No, I
And
think fear, tie it back to what you said earlier, is that, that it's not what happens to you in life, it's how you respond to what happens to you. And if you are fearful in a moment, not scared to your point, but fearful, like people talk about being the fear of God. That's a
yeah, oh,
very
interesting. Yeah,
interesting statement when people make that. When I was younger, I used to say, well, I'm supposed to fear God? Like
yeah,
he's a scary guy? No, that's not what it means. It means something else entirely. But I think this guy's chosen to channel whatever that temperature of fear that he has and knows that if I can attach that to something positive and attach that to something that allows me to take a positive action or make progress, then the fear becomes fuel, right? He sounds like a
yeah,
sharp
yeah.
guy. He sounds like an
Oh,
interesting
he
guy.
definitely was. He did. He's like I say, he's an impressive guy. But maybe that was the reason. Again, this is all coming back to me a little bit subconsciously. Was my answer was, don't be afraid to fail. I at that age, you feel like when you're going to fail. That's just part of it. But you can almost become paralyzed by not taking risks and not doing things, especially in a corporate environment and playing it
Mm-hmm.
too safe. So, and obviously, I'm speaking from my experiences, and I've made my fair mistakes. Obviously, I've recovered from them enough, or otherwise I wouldn't have been there, right? I wouldn't have been asked to be there. So it is interesting that I just by default went back to all I know, and that's showing up all the time, showing
Mm-hmm.
up prepared, showing up with a good attitude. And then these things pay off later on in life. And maybe that's when I think about it, what I was trying to convey to him is it's okay to fail, but you got to
Yeah, no,
try. You got to get,
that's a big one. I think that, I have taken my share of risks and I probably had some regrets about things that I didn't try to do or didn't attempt to do. It's kind of a balancing act for me. It's like when I sense fear, first thing I do is gauge it. Is my life on the line here, or is this some
Mhm.
lesser amount of fear? And if the only thing that I could experience is being criticized or being made fun of, that's a risk you probably should take. That's been my experience,
Mhm.
because that's nothing, you know,
Yeah.
that's nothing. I remember hearing somebody talk about public speaking, and it's like, the thing that people that don't do it because they're scared of it don't understand is when you walk up
Mhm.
there the first time
Yeah.
and you start talking into the microphone and you're sweating through your shirt and you're shaking and you're forgetting your lines. People aren't trying to make fun of you in the audience. They're admiring your courage for going up there to do it, you know? And it's easy to lose sight of that, I think. It is for me, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so the next one was we grow bitter, we grow better. Uh, this goes back to maybe more towards her because this divorce uh, can really sour you. It can really change your outlook about the world if it's a bad one. I obviously thought about a little bit about our discussions and what you experienced. She had mentioned she was in the very beginning stages, so I didn't to go in depth about that. But but I have seen people go through bad divorces and come out different people. They're jaded. They
Yeah.
see they don't trust people like and um and I think maybe now I think about that's what I was trying to it is a decision, right? By default, we're programmed um, to be bitter, to be mad at the world and to blame
Yeah, it's an
for those
interesting
things.
observation. I don't know that I agree with you. I think that maybe more people are than are not. I'll give you that. I don't remember being bitter for any extended period of time. I remember being angry. I remember being scared. I remember being angry a lot, but always thinking to myself, your anger will not serve you in any component of this journey right here. So figure that out. Get rid of that. And I also have, as you like to mention, my faith is part of my faith is the Catholic faith is this forgiveness idea, and it's not just about forgiving other people; it's about forgiving yourself. But you know, the Bible will tell you if you expect the Lord to forgive you, part of that condition is that you forgive other people who have trespassed against you. And I've incorporated into my practice just that. I forgive, there's 4 or 5 people that have wronged me in my mind, and I give them a couple of seconds of attention every single day in the form of a prayer. And that's very helpful. But
Mhm.
forgiveness is, it works both ways, you know, it works both ways.
Mhm. Uh, yeah, well, what I was speaking more towards that is often if you've had a bad experience, you'll project that on the rest of the world more as either a victim mentality or as everybody's like that. And to go through something difficult and come out the other end of it with what you learned about it and how it's makes you, and what doesn't break you makes you.
Hmm.
I like that a lot. And the other one was it's kind of my updated version of that. Don't let those negative events in life define you. Let them refine you.
Yeah, that's good. I like that.
Yeah,
I like that.
it's a different way of looking at it, because these little things add up to be big things. And then if you get so, down, or you get so jaded that you don't have excitement and enthusiasm for the future. I think that's what age could do. It does to most of us.
Yeah, I think to your point about bitter or better, I think to me, I see life kind of like it's all for me forks in the road, right? You get to a place where you're like, well, I can choose to do this or I can choose to do that, which reminds me that everything's a choice, right? That don't give that power away, right?
Mhm.
And the choice is always I'm going to learn from this if I go this way, or if I go this way, I don't see progress that way. I see negativity, I see skepticism, I see anger, I see whatever. And in hindsight, those choices are pretty obvious. It's when you're in the middle of the fork that you have to decide. You can't stay where you are. You got to go to the right or you got to go to the left. I think that's a large part of what defines us is what we do at those forks.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, I think we're about wrapping this one up, right, Mark?
Yeah, I think to swing back to the beginning of it, I think the it was great to see you. It was great to hug you and to shake your hand and to see you smile. And we got some laughter in there. And it's when we got to the bar, we were almost the only people in the bar. And then when we left, the place was packed. Talk
Mhm.
about human connection. But I think that, whatever we do with this show or the services we might provide down the road, I think it's going to involve human connection because I think
Mhm.
that the more I go through my days of work and play and family and friends, the more important that becomes for me. And I think it's because of what's happening in the world. I think that when you get pushed away from human connection or divided into groups or whatever, then my immediate reaction is, oh, I want more of that. Like when my kids come to visit and we sit in the living room and we just talk, or around the dinner table and just talk, where you connect with a friend you haven't talked to in months or years. It's magical. And I
Yeah.
think that kind of a reminder that whether you're meeting a stranger and two strangers in a hotel lobby waiting for an Uber, or some good friends at a bar, I think human connection is going to separate the successful people from the less successful people. And I think the world has kind of got a microscope on that right now. I just feel that.
Yeah, no question. Also, that something that came up through these different conversations, especially over the last week, was um, therapy. And I'm going to say that in kind of a respectful, but almost joking way, because it's become so popular that I'm finding that particularly women it's are bragging about it, and it was another conversation that came up in one of the rides to the conference center, and the person asked me, "Hey, Jim, do you believe in therapy?" I said, absolutely. I think anybody that does work on themselves is very good. I go, however, I have to share with you that it's interesting in recent years that when you're speaking to somebody that they bring it up so often, and I it's to the point now where you don't know if you're talking to them or you're talking to their therapist, and they'll even say sometimes, let me get back to you and I'll run that by my therapist. I said, I don't
Yeah.
think that's healthy. That's
No,
not
you know,
that's
it
not
makes me
healthy.
think about it makes me think about the analogy of it's a symptomatic approach to life versus a root cause approach to life is how I see
Mhm.
it. And I've seen therapy be very beneficial for people, but I also went
Absolutely.
through 7 therapists in my marriage counseling forced
Yeah.
upon me, and none of those people knew what they were talking about. They hadn't the lived life experience. They were pulling theory out of books. And
Yeah.
I think if you throw prescription drugs at a malady and don't change your lifestyle, you're going to have that malady for the rest of your life. It'll be a little
Hmm.
less painful on a day-to-day basis because whatever ailment it will buffer will be lessened. The swelling will stop for a moment. But if you don't get to the core of what the issue
Hmm.
is, eh, I'm with you.
Yeah. And the reason I bring it up is because what we're doing, which again eventually is to become a service, is it's somewhat of a hybrid, right? I wouldn't consider it consulting because we're not doing business consulting.
Hmm.
We're we're not certainly not doing therapy or claim to do therapy, but we've created a framework where we probably can make a lot of progress by even being aware of these 5 areas of your life, and then
Hmm.
having somebody that you can at least run it by, get some perspective on, and again, I contribute that to the framework, but also life lived experiences,
Well, it's
mistakes.
yeah, we've said it a million times at the beginning of our episodes. It's the self-reflection. It's like let's be honest about where we are,
Yeah.
and then maybe we can talk honestly about how we got here. And then let's talk about what are our values? What is important to us and why is it important to us? And when
Yeah.
you do that with someone who's got some wisdom and some lived experience, it's just helpful.
Yeah.
And it's a difficult set of exercises to do on your own. Doesn't mean you
Mhm.
can't do them on your own, but I think being kind of nudged and prodded by someone who actually gives a shit that's actually had a lot of life experience, it can
Or
be
has a
magical.
framework that a framework that you can have these conversations in context.
Hmm.
The center of our framework is the self and
Hmm.
self-awareness. It always starts with self-awareness.
Yep.
I'll even go back to the conversation with the two of them. They had self-awareness. They
Hmm.
not everybody does. That's
No.
probably why they were there at the conference and were in the positions they were. It does take some self-awareness. That's and then I love the selves, the library. I think I came up with another five on the airplane, but it just keeps going. I mean,
Yeah.
self-awareness, self-dignity, self-evaluation, self-reflection. It just keeps going and going and going. But it does start with yourself, and that's
If you're personally
yeah,
responsible, yeah. If you're personally accountable, yeah. Self-accountable, yeah. That's
self-accountable. It just keeps
no, it's
going.
fun. It's fun work, and we'll say it again. We're going to be on the website's on its way, and it's going to be when we're ready for people to look at it. We'll let you know, and then we'll have some descriptions about what some of these services might entail. But yeah,
Yeah.
hopefully that's some perspective. I really appreciate you bringing up the story, Jim, and
Yeah.
chat with you next week.
All right. Sounds good. Until then.